A scream tore through the quiet of the Manhattan restaurant. 7-year-old Noah Hawthorne fell from his chair, his small frame convulsing as fine crystal shattered on the floor. His eyes rolled back, and his lips turned a ghostly white. In that instant, time stopped. Nathan Hawthorne, the East Coast's most feared man, dropped to his knees. His hands, which had ended lives without a tremor, now shook as he lifted his son, repeating the boy's name to the silence. Guests in expensive suits stared in shock. Bodyguards reached for weapons, but there was no visible enemy. His fiancée, Camille Sinclair, stood frozen. Her face was colorless, her hands trembling not from fear, but from a terrible secret. Nathan's cold gray eyes, which had made powerful men beg, slowly rose to meet hers. He searched her face for a truth he desperately hoped not to find. A child's life was fading with every second. What you're about to hear is a story of revenge disguised as love, a 5-year conspiracy, and a woman with nothing who risked everything. This story will teach you that the deadliest enemies wear the kindest smiles, and that sometimes the only person brave enough to save you is the one the world has already forgotten. Stay until the end, because the moment of truth will change how you see everyone around you. To understand how a man with so much power could be brought to ruin, we have to go back. We must start where the story of Nathan Hawthorne truly began. The press wrote about him, but never dared to print the truth. He was disciplined, silent, and immensely powerful. At 36, Nathan led the Hawthorne family, a criminal empire stretching from New York to Miami. His name was spoken in whispers in rooms most people will never see. The underworld had a saying, "If you betray a Hawthorne, you simply disappear." But there was another side to him. Nathan was fiercely loyal and only took the lives of those who deserved it. He inherited the family business from his father at 28 and made it untouchable. None of that power mattered at home. Inside his house, Nathan was not a crime boss. He was just a father. He woke before the sun each morning, not for business, but to make Noah's eggs just right. He always tied his son's school tie himself. Noah once said to him with a serious face that Dad did not have to do everything by himself. The comment stung, a reminder of a time when he was not alone. Isabel, Noah's mother, had been his light. She believed in him when he was just a young man with blood on his hands, an uncertain future. Isabel loved the man, not the power. Her laugh was easy, her love was deep, and she made Nathan believe he could be happy. But 5 years ago, on a rainy night, she never came home. The Vega family, their greatest enemy, had made their move. A single phone call divided Nathan's life in two. They found Isabel in her car, cold beneath the rain. Nathan killed 17 men in revenge that night. He destroyed an entire branch of the Vega family, but no amount of blood could bring her back. After, the silence in his home was deafening. Noah was only 2. He was too young to understand death, but old enough to feel her gone. He cried for his mother for months. Every night, Nathan sat by his bed holding his small son, whispering a promise. "I am here. I will never leave you." From that day forward, Nathan's world revolved around his son. He offered love, protection, and maybe too much control. His family noticed. They started whispering, "A man like Nathan should not be alone. A boy needs a mother." His own mother, Eleanor, gently warned him not to let his pain become a prison. Nathan just stared at his hands. He did not reject love. He just no longer believed in it. The pressure came from those who cared about him. The family elders began speaking less of business and more of the future. They talked about Noah needing a complete family. "A boss needs a woman by his side," they said. Nathan knew they were worried for him, for Noah, and for the stability of the entire organization, but their words only made him feel trapped. Eleanor continued to gently push him. "My son," she said one morning, "you cannot live in the past. Isabel would not want this." He knew she was right, but knowing something and acting on it are two different things. Then he met Camille Sinclair. It was at a meeting of families in Las Vegas, an event he attended only out of obligation. The room was full of fake smiles and hidden threats. He was about to leave when she approached him. Camille was the daughter of a longtime ally. She was elegant, dressed in a simple black dress with golden hair and bright blue eyes. She was not like the other women in their world, a world of flashy jewelry and empty words. Camille was intelligent. She spoke about business, art, and books. More than that, she listened. When Nathan mentioned Noah, her expression softened. "I love children," she said softly. "They are honest." She did not ask about his wealth or power. She was not interested in the violent stories tied to his name. She was easy to talk to and never pushed. Or so it seemed. That night, Nathan found himself thinking of her. She gave him a feeling of peace he thought had died with Isabel. He had no idea that in a nearby hotel room, Camille was on the phone. Her voice was cold and sharp. "He's taken the bait," she said. "Give me time." On the other end of the call, Antonio Vega, the man who had ordered Isabel's death 5 years ago, gave a low laugh. "Time is a luxury, Camille. The child has to be gone before he can inherit. Without his heir, Hawthorne will crumble." Camille gazed at the Las Vegas lights below. "I understand," she replied. "I will get it done." She ended the call and looked in the mirror. The gentle smile she had shown Nathan was gone. It was replaced by the look of a predator. Nathan Hawthorne believed he had met an angel. In reality, he had found a blade aimed at his heart. While Nathan lived in a guarded mansion, a woman in a poor corner of Brooklyn was fighting a different battle for survival. Her name was Evelyn Harper, and she was 27 years old. Evelyn had no one. She lived in a small apartment with rusty pipes and a window that never fully closed. The cold night air was a constant reminder that life had never been kind to her. She never knew her parents. She was found as a baby at an orphanage in Queens, wrapped in a blanket with a note that only said Evelyn. She grew up in the foster system, moving from one temporary house to another, never finding a home. She learned early not to expect anything from the world. At 18, she left the system with $200 and no family. She worked any job she could find, cleaning, serving food, and delivering packages. She survived in cheap rooms, on just enough food to get by. She clutched her stomach to keep from passing out, dreaming of a place she could finally call her own. That was before Brandon Mitchell. She was 22, working in a coffee shop when he first walked in. Brandon was a young, handsome lawyer with a smile that could disarm anyone. He came in every morning, tipped well, and looked at Evelyn like she was the only one there. For the first time, she felt important. She felt loved. When he proposed just 6 months later, Evelyn said yes without a second thought. She believed she had found her family. She was desperate for love, and she thought this was it. She was wrong. After the wedding, Brandon became a different person overnight. The mask was gone. He controlled every part of Evelyn's life, from her clothes to her friends. He was pathologically jealous, accusing her if she even glanced at another man. When control failed, he used his fists. The first time he hit her was in their 2nd month of marriage. Brandon cried and promised it would never happen again. Evelyn wanted to believe him. It was a mistake. A slap became a punch became a kick. Soon, Evelyn was spending nights on the floor, tasting blood and wondering what she did to deserve it. She endured 3 years of this hell. Evelyn was too afraid to leave. Brandon swore he would kill her if she tried. He was a lawyer with power and money. Who would believe a poor orphan against him? When she was 23, Evelyn learned she was pregnant. The thought of bringing a child into that nightmare terrified her. But the moment Ruby was born, Evelyn looked into her daughter's eyes and knew she had to survive. She had to live for Ruby. When her daughter turned 3, Evelyn finally ran. She waited for Brandon to leave on a business trip, packed one small bag, and vanished with her daughter. But freedom was a luxury Evelyn could not afford. Brandon found her. This time, he did not use his fists. He did something far worse. He hired the best lawyers in the city and used his influence to destroy her in court. He painted Evelyn as an unstable mother. The court believed him. Brandon won full custody. Evelyn was only allowed to see Ruby one time a month, with a supervisor watching her every move. She was treated like a criminal. A year ago, Brandon died in a car crash. For a moment, Evelyn thought she could finally get her daughter back. But Brandon's wealthy family stepped in. They hated Evelyn and took custody of Ruby, cutting her off for good. Now, Evelyn lives in a tiny Brooklyn apartment and works 3 jobs. She cleans buildings, serves coffee, and washes dishes. She is thin and always tired, but she saves every dollar for a lawyer. Every night, she looks at a photo of Ruby and whispers, "Mommy is coming for you. I promise." The call came on a Tuesday morning. Evelyn had just finished cleaning and was on her way to the coffee shop. She did not recognize the number but answered anyway. It was an employment agency she had signed up with months ago. They had an urgent job opening for a nanny with a rich family on the Upper East Side. The salary they offered was so high, Evelyn almost dropped her phone. It was 5 times more than what her 3 jobs paid combined. With that kind of money, she could hire a lawyer in months, not years. She could get Ruby back. Her heart hammered in her chest. She asked for the family's name. The agent said, "Hawthorne." Evelyn froze on the sidewalk. Everyone in New York knew that name. They were the most powerful crime family on the coast. People whispered stories of violence and disappearances. Evelyn hesitated for a second. Then she thought of Ruby's face and the promise she made every night. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. She had already survived one monster. She could handle another. 2 days later, Evelyn stood before the huge iron gates of the Hawthorne mansion. Her heart pounded like a drum. She wore her only clean, undamaged outfit. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore no makeup because she owned none. She knew she looked exhausted and thin, not like a proper nanny, but she hoped they would see her determination. The woman who interviewed her was not Nathan Hawthorne. It was his mother, Eleanor, a woman of 68 with sharp, intelligent eyes. She sat in a vast living room, holding a teacup and studying Evelyn closely. The interview was strange. Eleanor did not ask about her experience. She asked why Evelyn wanted the job. Evelyn could have lied, but she was too exhausted for games. "Because I need to get my daughter back," she said, her voice shaking but her eyes firm. "I know what it means to love a child that much, and I need money for a good lawyer." A long silence followed. Evelyn was sure she had failed, but Eleanor simply set down her teacup. "You are hired," she said. Just then, the doors opened, and Nathan Hawthorne entered. He was tall and broad, dressed in a perfect black suit. His face was hard, and his gray eyes were cold as ice. He looked at Evelyn as if she were a piece of furniture. "You will take care of my son," he said, his voice low. "That is all. Do not ask questions. Do not talk to outsiders. Do not get curious. Do you understand?" Evelyn nodded. She had seen worse men. Brandon's voice had been just as cold right before he hit her. But Evelyn saw something else in Nathan's eyes, hidden behind the frost. It was fear. He was afraid of losing something. On her first day, Evelyn met his son, Noah. The boy was in his room, reading a book, and did not look up when she came in. Evelyn did not try to force a conversation. She just sat down quietly near him. "What are you reading?" she asked after a few minutes. Noah looked at her with serious eyes, judging her. Then, he silently held out the book for her to see. They sat together and read. No forced smiles, no fake enthusiasm. Evelyn knew this was how it had to begin. Around this time, Nathan was getting closer to a woman named Camille. After they met in Las Vegas, their short texts became long phone calls and quiet dinners. Camille was never demanding. She was patient and elegant, always giving him space. This was new to Nathan. Most women wanted the power and money that came with his name. Camille seemed different. She asked about his life but never pried. She worried about his health and the stress he was under. When Nathan spoke about Noah, she listened with what seemed like real interest. "Your son must always come first," she told him. One dinner, that was all. She had said she would never expect him to choose her over Noah. Those words settled something in Nathan's soul. After 3 months together, he decided Camille should meet his son. It was a huge step, a risk he had not taken with anyone since his wife Isabel passed away. Noah was everything to him. Allowing someone new into that small world meant he was opening his heart again, a thing he thought was no longer possible. The introduction happened on a Sunday afternoon at their home. Nathan analyzed every single flicker of emotion on his son's face when Camille entered. She had chosen a simple cream dress and wore her hair down, looking warm and approachable. Kneeling to meet Noah's gaze, she offered a gentle smile. "Your father tells me so much about you," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I am so glad to finally meet you." Noah gave a polite smile back, but his eyes, too old for a boy of 7, studied her for a long moment. Then he declared that she smelled good. Camille's laugh was light and easy. A current of relief washed over Nathan. He believed it was all going to be okay. In the following weeks, Camille became a more frequent guest at the estate. She would offer to help Noah with his schoolwork, even with Evelyn standing by to assist. She sometimes prepared meals, though the family chef needed no help. She brought Noah presents, like expensive toys, new books, and designer clothing. When Nathan was present, her affection was constant. She was always quick with a word of praise or a soft touch for the boy. But children see the details that adults miss. Noah saw the way Camille's smile cooled when Nathan held him in a hug for too long. The warmth would disappear, replaced by a cold flash in her eyes that was gone in an instant. He heard the sharp edge in her voice when Nathan had to cancel a date for one of Noah's school functions. He noticed how she was quick to correct everything he did, from how he held his fork to how he sat, but her praise for him never felt real. One day, Nathan left the room to answer a phone call. Camille let out a soft sigh and muttered that the boy was far too dependent on his father. Just a few words, but they made Noah's stomach clench. He did not know why, but Evelyn saw it as well. She remained silent. It was not her place to say anything about her employer's future wife, but she could not ignore the way Noah's small body would stiffen the moment Camille walked into a room. She saw his smiles become forced. She saw how his eyes would dart toward her, as if he were searching for a safe place. One evening, after Camille had gone home, Nathan was tucking Noah in. The boy grabbed his father's hand and asked with a small voice if Camille liked him. The question stopped Nathan cold. "Why would you ask that?" Noah just shrugged. "I do not know. She just seems sad when you and I play together." Nathan put on a smile and smoothed his son's hair. "She is just adjusting to all of this," he explained. "It takes adults time." The boy said nothing more. He simply nodded and shut his eyes. But Nathan stayed awake late into the night. His son's question had planted a tiny seed of doubt in his mind. He quickly pushed it away. He had put so much hope into this relationship. He had to believe Camille was a good person, that she loved Noah, and that he had found someone to build a new family with. He needed this to work, for Noah and for himself. He needed to feel whole again. He did not understand that jealousy, once it takes root, can grow in silence, and it often aims for the most vulnerable person in the room. As Nathan and Camille's relationship deepened, a different connection was forming quietly within the Hawthorne estate. The bond between Evelyn and Noah was not built on costly gifts or sweet promises. It grew in the quiet moments that no one else saw. Each afternoon, Evelyn and Noah would sit together in the reading room. She never pressured him to speak. She would just read her own book as he read his. Sometimes a full hour would go by without a word between them. But it was a peaceful silence, the kind shared between two people who understand each other without speaking. Slowly, Noah started to tell Evelyn about his books. He talked about his favorite characters, the endings he would have changed, and the stories he hoped to write one day. Evelyn listened to it all. She never cut him off or passed judgment. Her questions showed she was truly interested. They were not the polite questions adults ask children out of duty. At 7 years old, Noah could already spot the difference between genuine kindness and an imitation of it. Evelyn was genuine. One night, Evelyn was in her room reading when she heard a muffled, choked sound coming from down the hall. It was crying. She rushed to Noah's room, eased the door open, and saw him curled into a ball on his bed. His face was wet with tears, and his little frame was shaking in the darkness. A bad dream. Evelyn did not ask what happened. She just walked to the bed, sat on the edge, and gathered Noah into her arms. He melted into her embrace, sobbing against her. His small hands gripped her shirt, as if he feared she would vanish. "I dreamed of my mom," Noah whispered. "I saw her walking away. I called for her, but she didn't turn around." Evelyn had no easy answers. She could not offer false comforts like "it will be all right" or "do not cry." She just held him closer and started to sing. It was a lullaby she sang to Ruby every night, back when her own daughter was still in her arms. It was from a time before her life had been torn apart. Evelyn's voice was not perfect, a bit worn from years of hardship, but it was full of honest emotion. The song was soft, a gentle melody that wrapped around the boy like a warm blanket. Noah's crying slowly subsided, his breaths becoming even and calm. He looked up at Evelyn, his eyes still swollen, but the fear was gone. "You are like my mom," he whispered. "She used to sing that to me." A knot formed in Evelyn's chest. She fought to keep her composure, but a single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever told her. Later that night, long after Noah was sound asleep, Evelyn sat in her room, clutching the photograph of Ruby. Her daughter was only 3 in the picture, her smile so bright, her eyes so clear. She had no idea that her mother would lose her only months later. Evelyn tormented herself wondering if Ruby had nightmares now. Did anyone hold her when she cried? Did anyone sing to her, or was she all alone in the dark? Did she call out for her mother with nobody to answer, just as Noah had in his dream? Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she held the picture to her heart. She whispered the same words she said every single night. "Mommy is coming for you. I promise." Looking after Noah eased some of her pain. It felt as if protecting this boy could somehow atone for failing her own daughter. But it also made her miss Ruby more intensely, a sharp and constant ache. Every time she looked at Noah, she saw her daughter. She saw everything she had lost. And she saw what she had to win back, no matter the cost. 6 months after they first met, Nathan asked Camille to marry him. The proposal was quiet and simple. There were no cameras, no grand declarations, and no audience of hundreds, which was unusual for people in their social circle. Nathan took Camille back to the restaurant of their first date. He ordered her favorite wine, and at the end of the meal, he slid a small black velvet box across the table. Camille wept. She accepted. She threw her arms around Nathan and told him she was the happiest woman alive. Nathan believed her. He needed to believe her. When Noah heard the news, he offered a polite round of applause. The smile he wore was so well practiced that no one saw how much effort it took. "Congratulations, Dad," he said, his voice even and obedient. It was a tone he used for things he knew he could not fight. "Congratulations, Camille." Nathan tousled his son's hair, his own heart swelling with hope. He believed that after 5 years of being alone, he could finally give Noah a whole family again. He failed to see the tension in his son's shoulders, or that the smile did not reach his eyes. He did not notice the boy asked to be excused to his room much earlier than usual. That night, alone in the dark, Noah hugged his pillow a little tighter. He did not weep. He had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. He just stared at the ceiling, wondering why his own heart felt so heavy when his father was so happy. He thought maybe something was wrong with him. Maybe he should be happy too. Evelyn knew. She was passing Noah's room on her way to bed and saw him lying there, still awake. His eyes were wide open in the dark. She did not enter the room or ask any questions. She just stood in the doorway for a moment, her own heart aching with a familiar pain. She knew exactly what it felt like to be left behind in someone else's joy. After the engagement, Camille began to shift. The transformation was small, almost invisible, unless you were paying close attention. To everyone else, she remained the ideal fiancée. She was graceful at parties and supportive in meetings, always positioned just behind Nathan with a soft smile. Her hand would rest lightly on his arm, a silent message to the world that this man belonged to her. But inside the home, Camille's presence grew. She became more assertive, more controlling. She began insisting on having breakfast with Nathan and Noah each morning. "You should not start your day in a rush," she would say with a perfect smile, pouring Nathan's coffee for him. "Besides, it is important for everyone to see that we are a family." Nathan liked the sound of that word. He did not notice how she stressed the word we, as if she were marking her territory. Evelyn watched it all. From the kitchen, she saw it all while she made Noah's breakfast. She saw Camille's bright smile fade the second Nathan left the room. She watched Camille's blue eyes follow Noah, not with a mother's love, but with the cold focus of a rival. Camille's corrections never stopped. "Sit straighter. Use your spoon the right way. Do not interrupt the adults." The words were never cruel, but they were never kind. Each command was small and reasonable, but together they built an invisible cage that made Noah smaller every day. The 7-year-old boy started to eat without a word, his gaze fixed on his plate. He just tried to avoid another correction. Evelyn burned to speak up, to give a name to the awful feeling in her chest. But what could she do? She was just a nanny, an orphan with no one, working for the strongest mafia boss in New York. No one would ever listen to her. Evelyn had tried to expose a monster like Brandon once before. The world ignored her and took her daughter from her. She could not bear that pain again, so she said nothing. She watched, and she waited. She just held Noah a little closer when the nightmares came. She did not know her silence was about to be broken. Camille's quiet corrections at breakfast were only the beginning. The cruelty grew slowly, like water heating up around a frog that does not notice it is boiling. The first true line was crossed on a Wednesday. Noah came home from school with a fever. Nathan was in a critical meeting with other bosses and could not leave. He called home, his voice tight with worry. He asked Camille to please stay with Noah. He promised to be home as soon as he could. "Of course," Camille said, her voice like honey. "Do not worry. I will take care of everything." But after the call, her smile vanished. She looked down at Noah on the sofa. His face was red with fever. She sighed with irritation. "Are you faking sick again so your father comes home?" she asked. Noah's eyes fluttered open. "I am not faking," he whispered. "I really am sick." Camille did not reply. She put a glass of water on the table, then sat across the room and stared at her phone. She never checked his temperature. She never asked if he needed anything. Noah just lay there, feeling more alone than ever. The coldness hurt more than the fever. When Nathan came home, Noah was asleep, covered with a neat blanket. Camille was still on her phone. "He did not eat," she said without looking up. "I think he does it for attention." A flicker of doubt crossed Nathan's face, but he pushed it away. His son was sick. That was all that mattered. He lifted Noah into his arms, kissed his hot forehead, and carried him to bed. He missed the icy stare Camille sent after them, but Evelyn saw it. She was standing in the doorway with a bowl of porridge for Noah. That was not the look of a worried future stepmother. It was pure jealousy, sharp enough to cut. In the days that followed, Evelyn watched more closely. She saw Noah become quieter, saw him shrink whenever Camille entered a room. He stopped running through the halls. His laughter disappeared. He no longer spoke about his books. One night, Evelyn was tucking him into bed. "Miss Evelyn," he whispered, his voice so quiet she had to lean in. "Today, Camille told me not to pretend to be sick. She said Dad has more important things to do than worry about me. A cold knot formed in Evelyn's chest. How did that make you feel? She asked, keeping her voice steady. I was sad, Noah said, his eyes welling up with tears. I was not pretending. Evelyn hugged him, trembling with a rage she could not show. She was powerless. She was only the nanny. All she could offer was a hug and a promise that she believed him. But the worst was still on its way. It came a few nights later. Nathan was out late, leaving Camille alone with Noah. Evelyn heard Camille's voice from Noah's bathroom as she walked past. It was no longer soft. It was hard and sharp. You know, Noah, your father is going to love me more than you. You will be sent away to school. Nobody wants a needy child. You are just a weight on your father. Your mother is gone, and soon you will be all alone. Evelyn stood frozen in the hall. She heard Noah's small, broken sobs. It was the sound of a 7-year-old boy's heart being torn apart. She wanted to run in and shield him from those toxic words. But the bathroom door opened. Camille stepped out, and their eyes met for a single moment. Camille saw Evelyn standing there. Evelyn saw a flash in Camille's eyes. It was not fear. It was the cold assessment of someone caught who felt no guilt. Then, the sweet smile returned. Oh, Evelyn, she said, her tone perfectly normal. Can you help Noah with his teeth? He is very tired tonight. Camille then walked away, the silk of her dress rustling against the floor. Evelyn watched her go, her heart pounding. Camille knew that she had heard every single word, and Evelyn knew that she was no longer safe in this house. But her own safety did not matter. Only Noah mattered. The boy stood in the bathroom, his eyes red and his cheeks wet with tears. Evelyn went to him and knelt, pulling him into a hug. She said nothing. She just held him while he cried into her shoulder, whispering over and over that she was there. But a fire was now burning inside Evelyn. She could not be silent any longer. That night Noah did not sleep. He just lay in his bed staring at nothing. Camille's words played in his head like a terrible song. Your dad will love me more than you. You are just a burden. You will be left behind. Around midnight, he could not stand it anymore. He got out of bed and walked silently down the hall to Evelyn's room. He knocked on the door. The sound was so quiet, it was almost a ghost. Evelyn opened it instantly, as if she knew he would come. Miss Evelyn, Noah whispered, his voice breaking as fresh tears fell. I am scared of Camille. Evelyn pulled the small boy into her room without a word and closed the door. She wrapped her arms around him, and Noah finally broke down. He cried with all the fear and loneliness that he had held inside for so long. And there, safe in Evelyn's arms, he told her everything. He told her about the cold stares when his father was gone, and the sharp words that were only for him to hear. He talked about the hatred he felt in his own home. He felt like he was vanishing a little more every day. Noah cried, saying he could not tell his father. Dad loves Camille. He is happy. I do not want to hurt him, and I am afraid. I am so afraid he will not believe me. Evelyn embraced him, her own heart shattering. She understood that fear. She knew what it was like to speak the truth, only to be ignored. To be called a liar while standing alone. She had tried to expose Brandon, and for that, the world took her daughter. I believe you, Evelyn whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Noah, I believe every word. The boy looked up, his eyes swollen and red. A tiny spark of hope he thought was gone forever returned. You do? She said firmly. Yes, and I will keep you safe, I promise. The vow escaped her before she could stop it. But once spoken, she knew it was a promise she had to keep, no matter the cost. After Noah was finally asleep in her room, Evelyn sat alone in the dark, her mind at war. Speaking up about what she knew would cost her the job. Without her job, she had no income. Without income, she could not afford a lawyer. Without a lawyer, She would never see Ruby again. 2 years of sacrifice and hard work could disappear if she dared to say something. But what if she stayed quiet? What if she pretended to see nothing, just to keep her job and save her money? She would have to watch Noah break, day by day. She would witness another child suffer, just as Ruby might be suffering now, helpless and alone. Evelyn closed her eyes. She saw Ruby's face, then Noah's. The images of the two children merged, both of them crying out for their mothers. She could not save Ruby yet, but she could save Noah. If she failed, she would never forgive herself. As morning came, it felt like the sky was weeping with her. Her spirit finally broke. Evelyn had chosen her path. She would go to Nathan. She would tell him the truth, even if he refused to believe her, even if she lost everything. Doing what is right is rarely easy, but it was the only choice she could live with. She waited for Camille to leave before making her move. She understood she had one shot and could not risk Camille's presence. That morning, Camille left the mansion to see a wedding planner. Evelyn drew a steadying breath and walked to Nathan's study. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she knocked on the heavy door. "Come in." Nathan's voice was as cold and commanding as always. Evelyn entered. The room was huge, with dark wood walls and a massive oak desk. Nathan sat behind it, examining documents. He glanced up, his gray eyes empty of any warmth. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharp with impatience. "Mr. Hawthorne," Evelyn started, her voice shaking just a little. "I have to talk to you about Noah." Nathan put down his pen, his focus sharpened. "What about my son?" Evelyn swallowed hard. There was no going back. "It is about Camille, sir, and how she treats Noah when you are not around." A heavy silence descended on the room. Nathan remained silent, but his eyes grew dark like a gathering storm. Evelyn told him everything. She described the day Noah had a fever, and Camille accused him of faking it. She spoke of the cold glares and contemptuous remarks Nathan never saw. She repeated the threats she had overheard in the bathroom that night. "Your dad will love me more than you. You will be sent away. Nobody wants a needy child like you." When Evelyn finished, Nathan's face was a mask of stone. Not of belief, but of cold rage. He rose from his desk, his towering frame making the large room feel small. "You are accusing my fiancée of mistreating my son," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Evelyn stood her ground, though her legs trembled. "I am only telling you what I saw and what I heard, sir. I am not inventing a story." Nathan moved toward her, each step a menacing beat. "Camille loves Noah. She is going to be his mother. And you, a member of the staff, dare to stand here and defame her." "I am not defaming her," Evelyn insisted, her voice trembling more now, but she refused to back down. "I am telling you the truth. If you do not believe me, then ask your son. Look him in the eyes and ask if he is afraid of Camille." Her words made Nathan hesitate for a moment. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. He remembered Noah's question from the other night. "Does Camille like me?" But he forced the thought away. He had invested so much in this new life. He had let himself feel something for the first time in 5 years. He could not accept he was wrong. He could not accept he had brought a monster into his son's life. Admitting that meant admitting he had failed as a father. And Nathan Hawthorne never failed. "Get out," he commanded, his voice like ice. "But Mr. Hawthorne, this is your one and only warning," Nathan interrupted. "If I hear you say another word about this, you will be out of this house for good. Do you understand me?" Evelyn looked at him with a broken heart. Not because of his threat, but because she knew his refusal to listen was abandoning his son to danger, and she was powerless to stop it. She gave a slow nod and left the room. She did not cry. She had lost the ability to cry long ago. But something inside her, a piece of hope, had just been extinguished. She was unaware that her meeting with Nathan had not been private. Patrick Sullivan, Nathan's chief of staff, had been passing by in the hall and heard nearly everything. He intended no harm. He simply thought his boss's fiancée should know that someone was trying to damage their relationship. Later that evening, Patrick casually told Camille about the conversation. For a brief second, her blue eyes turned to ice before her gentle smile returned. "Thank you for telling me," she said in a soft voice. "It is a shame someone wants to pull us apart, but I will not allow it." After Patrick was gone, Camille stood alone in the living room, her smile completely gone. She took out her phone and made a call. "The nanny is a problem," she said into the phone, her voice flat and cold. From the other end, Antonio Vega responded, "Then get rid of her. Use any means you must." Camille disconnected the call, her eyes gleaming in the dark. A plan was already forming. Camille acted with a speed Evelyn could never have foreseen. The trap was set just 2 days after her talk with Nathan. The day started normally. Evelyn rose early, made Noah's breakfast, and drove him to school. She did not know that while she was out, Camille entered her room. A diamond necklace, emerald earrings, and a ruby ring. Camille's most valuable jewelry was carefully placed under Evelyn's pillow. More was hidden in her dresser, inside her worn handbag. Camille was meticulous, leaving no evidence of her entry. She then walked out of the room with a look of pure satisfaction. That afternoon, when Evelyn returned home with Noah, the air in the mansion felt heavy and strange. The other staff members would not meet her gaze. Patrick stood near the front door, looking tense. Nathan was waiting in the living room. Camille sat next to him, her eyes red as if from crying. "Evelyn," Nathan said, his voice as cold as steel. "Come here." A feeling of dread washed over Evelyn. She knew something was terribly wrong. She walked into the room, Noah clinging to her hand, as if he too could sense the approaching danger. "My jewelry is gone," Camille said, her voice shaking with practiced sorrow. "I have searched everywhere for it. I did not want to think this," but then she paused, looking at Evelyn with an expression of fake grief that only Evelyn could see was a lie. Nathan signaled to Patrick, "Search her room." Evelyn felt frozen. This could not be happening. Before she could object, Patrick came back holding Camille's jewelry. He had found it exactly where Camille had planted it, beneath the pillow in the drawer inside her bag. "I did not take anything," Evelyn said, her voice cracking with shock and fury. "I swear I did not. Somebody framed me." Nathan stared at her, his gray eyes devoid of any trust. "I gave you a warning," he said, his words heavy and final. "You came here with stories about your troubles, about a daughter you were fighting for. I trusted you. I paid you a good wage. And this is how you repay me? By slandering my fiancée and then robbing her." "I did not steal," Evelyn cried out, tears finally escaping her. "I was framed." "She did this," she insisted, pointing at Camille. "She did this to make me leave, because I know what she really is." Camille erupted in sobs. A perfect act. "I do not know why she despises me," she wept. "I only want to be a mother to Noah. Why is she trying to ruin our family?" Nathan pulled Camille into an embrace, his look toward Evelyn filled with disgust. "No one believes the help," Camille whispered through her tears, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "How tragic." Those 5 words cut Evelyn deeper than any knife, because she knew they were true. "Get out of my house," Nathan ordered. His voice was cold. "Now." Evelyn knew it was over. No one had believed her about Brandon. The court had not believed her about Ruby, and now Nathan did not believe her. People with money always won. Their power twisted the truth into any shape they wanted. Her hands trembled as she packed, making it hard to fold her clothes. As she slung her bag over her shoulder, she saw Noah in the doorway. His eyes were red. He had heard it all. "Miss Evelyn," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please don't leave." She fell to her knees and pulled him close. "I am so sorry," she choked out through her tears. "I promised I would protect you." "You promised," he cried back. "You said you would stay." All she could say was, "I am sorry." "Will you come back?" Noah asked, his voice filled with a desperate hope. She could not lie to him. She could not make that promise. Evelyn held him tight and kissed his forehead. "Remember this," she whispered. "This is not your fault." Then she stood up and walked away. She did not look back. If she did, she would never leave. Outside, the rain started. It soaked her clothes as she passed through the gates of the estate, but she was numb. She sat on a wet bench at a bus stop and finally let herself break. She wept for Noah, the boy she had left in danger. She wept for Ruby, her own daughter, now further from her reach than ever. She wept for her entire life of 27 years of pain. "Ruby," she whispered to the storm, "I failed you again." The cold rain fell without pity. After Evelyn was gone, the Hawthorne mansion felt colder to Noah. A new nanny arrived quickly. Her name was Margaret, a woman with a blank face and empty eyes. Margaret did her duties perfectly. She drove Noah to school, served his meals, and made sure he was home on time. But she never asked about his books. She never sat with him. She never sang away his nightmares. Margaret was a shadow where a warm presence used to be. With Evelyn gone, Camille felt completely safe. She knew a 7-year-old boy had no power against her. The only person who had spoken up was gone. So Camille stopped pretending. The moment Nathan was out of the house, her cruel words would begin. "You see," Camille said with a cold smile, "they threw your nanny out. Nobody listened to her, and nobody will ever listen to you." Noah just stared at the floor. He tried to become smaller, to vanish, but Camille always found him. She started pinching him in secret, sharp pains under his clothes. Her whispers became more venomous. "Your mother died because of you," she hissed one night outside his door. "If you were never born, she would still be here." She told him his father would soon have a new baby and forget him entirely. The words were like daggers in his heart. Nightmares plagued him. He dreamed of his father abandoning him in the dark forever. He would wake up covered in cold sweat, calling out for Miss Evelyn. But she was gone. Margaret never checked on him, and he was too scared to call for his father. Finally, one night, Noah went to Nathan's study. He stood in the doorway, a small silhouette twisting his pajama shirt. "Dad?" Nathan looked up from his desk. "What is it, son?" Noah opened his mouth to tell him everything. He wanted to talk about the pinches and the horrible words. He wanted to explain the fear that was eating him alive. But then he thought of Evelyn. His dad had thrown her out for telling the truth. He would not believe him either, and Camille would make everything worse. "Camille says," he started in a small voice. "What does Camille say?" Nathan asked, his brow furrowed. Noah looked at his father's tired eyes. He saw love there, but he also saw the unshakable trust Nathan had for Camille. He could not do it. "Nothing," Noah whispered. "I just wanted to say goodnight." Nathan smiled and pulled his son into a hug. "Good night, son. I love you." "I love you too," Noah replied, hiding his face and his unshed tears. Alone in his room that night, Noah learned a terrible lesson. He learned that the truth was dangerous. He learned that silence was survival. The boy became quieter and smaller, growing old before his time. He wondered if Miss Evelyn even remembered him. But Evelyn had not forgotten. After that night in the rain, she did not go home. She sat at the bus stop until sunrise. She had lost her job and her income. She had lost her best chance to get Ruby back. But one thing remained, the image of Noah crying in the doorway. She had made a promise to protect that child. Evelyn was a survivor. She had endured the orphanage. She had escaped Brandon. She would not let Camille win. She took the money she had saved for a lawyer, the money for Ruby, and made a difficult choice. She hired a private investigator. His name was Frank Morrison, a former cop with sharp eyes and a serious face. He listened to her story about Camille Sinclair, took the cash, and began his work. 2 weeks passed. Then Frank called. His voice was urgent. "We need to meet, right now." They met at a small diner. Frank slid a thick envelope across the table. "This woman is more than you think," he said in a low voice. "She makes secret calls. She meets with strange people." He leaned in. "She is in contact with Antonio Vega." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Vega was the head of a crime family and the Hawthorns' greatest enemy. He was the man who had ordered the murder of Nathan's first wife 5 years ago. "She's a spy," Evelyn breathed. The truth clicked into place. "Worse than a spy," Frank corrected. "I overheard a call. Vega wants her to get rid of the boy. He wants her to eliminate Noah." A wave of nausea hit Evelyn. Camille was not just a cruel woman. She was an assassin sent to destroy Nathan's family. The first target was his son. With a shaking hand, she opened the envelope. Inside were pictures of Camille with unknown men. There were phone logs, dates, and times. It was real proof, but she knew she could not go to Nathan. He would never believe her. He would think it was just revenge. She needed a different ally, someone Nathan trusted who might actually listen. She needed Eleanor Hawthorne. That evening, Evelyn wrote a long letter. She explained everything. She described Camille's whispers, the setup that cost her the job, and the investigator's chilling discovery. She included all of Frank's evidence. She pleaded with Eleanor to believe her, not for herself, but to save Noah. She mailed the letter and began to wait, her chest tight with anxiety. Across town, in a penthouse apartment, Camille Sinclair answered her phone. The cold voice of Antonio Vega was on the other end. Model, "Your time is up, Camille. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Our window is closing. You have to act now." "I need more time," Camille pleaded, her voice shaking for the first time. "No," Antonio said, cutting her off. "Get rid of the child. It must look like an accident, a food allergy, a fall. I do not care how. When the boy is gone, Nathan will be broken. Then we move in and destroy the Hawthorns." There was a long silence. Camille looked out at the city lights. She thought of Noah, the little boy with such sad eyes. She felt no regret, only a cold sense of purpose. "The boy is severely allergic to hazelnuts," she said. "A reaction could end him in minutes if no one helps him in time." "Good," Antonio replied, his voice filled with satisfaction. "Your engagement party is soon. It will be crowded, chaotic, perfect for an accident." "I understand," Camille said. She hung up the phone. Her blue eyes were like ice. The plan was ready. She just needed the right moment. She had distrusted Camille for a long time, but never had any proof. Now the proof was in her hands, and the truth was worse than anything she had imagined. She tried to call Nathan, but his phone was off for the party preparations. She decided she would confront him at the party, in front of everyone if she had to. She did not realize she was already too late. Evelyn did not wait. After she mailed the letter to Eleanor, she kept a close watch on Camille. She knew the engagement party was tonight at a 5-star hotel, and she felt a mother's certainty that something terrible was going to happen there. A feeling of dread grew inside her all day. In her purse, she carried an epinephrine injector she had kept from her time at the mansion. She knew all about Noah's severe hazelnut allergy. She knew that a reaction could be fatal in minutes. She had always kept one nearby, just in case. She guided by a strange instinct. The restaurant was filled with golden light and the sound of laughter. Men in expensive suits and women in beautiful dresses held sparkling glasses of champagne. Nathan stood in the middle of it all with Camille on his arm. She smiled, looking like the happiest woman alive. Noah sat next to his father in a small suit, as silent as a ghost. He did not smile. He just watched the room with old eyes, as if expecting a disaster. Evelyn entered through a service door, dressed as a waitress. She stood in a corner and watched. She saw Camille charming the guests. She saw Nathan holding his fiancée's hand. She saw Noah, looking small and scared. When dessert arrived, Evelyn noticed something. Camille leaned over to Noah's plate. Her hand moved in a quick, secret motion. It was over in a second. Evelyn saw it all. She watched Camille shake a powder onto the boy's dessert. Her heart seized in her chest. She tried to scream, but she was too far away. Evelyn fought through the dense crowd, desperate to get to Nathan's table. But the crush of bodies was too much, and she was too small to break through. Noah stared at the chocolate cake and cream before him. He did not feel hungry, but Camille's sweet, chilling voice urged him to eat. Noah took a spoonful, then another. After the third bite, he stopped. An itch started in his throat. A strange tingling spread across his lips. He looked down, and a wave of terror hit him as he realized what it was. Hazelnuts. "Dad," he choked out, but Nathan was busy with guests and did not hear him. But Camille heard. She looked at the boy, and her eyes held no concern. They held only excitement. She was waiting for him to stop breathing. Within moments, Noah's throat swelled shut. He gasped, but his lungs found no air. He reached for his father before his strength gave out. He slid from his chair, his small frame shaking violently on the floor. The party's elegant calm shattered into pure panic. Nathan was instantly on the marble beside his son, his powerful body trembling with a fear no enemy had ever given him. He held Noah's limp form and roared his name, his desperate voice silencing the entire room. Camille stood frozen, a flicker of guilt on her face as she watched the boy's life fade. Then, a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Your fiancé poisoned your son." Evelyn had finally reached them. She no longer worried about being seen or the consequences. All she saw was Noah, the child she swore to protect, dying. She fell to her knees beside him and took an epinephrine injector from her purse. Her hands were steady. A life of hardship had prepared her for this. She drove the needle into Noah's thigh, her movements certain. "Call an ambulance," she commanded. "He is having an anaphylactic reaction." Nathan's eyes darted from Evelyn to his son, and then to Camille. For the first time, he truly saw his fiancée. He saw the coldness he had chosen to ignore. Her expression was not one of worry for Noah. It was the calculated anger of someone whose plan had been ruined. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and terror. Camille did not speak. She was trapped. The ambulance arrived in what felt like an eternity. Paramedics placed an oxygen mask on Noah's face and lifted him onto a stretcher. Nathan got in with his son, watching as the medicine slowly brought color back to his cheeks. Before the doors shut, he turned to Patrick and gave a command in a voice like ice. "Keep her here. Do not let her leave." In that moment, Camille Sinclair understood true fear. Mount Sinai Hospital was on high alert. Dozens of Nathan's bodyguards lined the hallways, their hands near hidden weapons, their eyes scanning for threats. The medical staff worked under immense pressure. They knew the boy in intensive care was Nathan Hawthorne's son, and a single error could be their last. Nathan never left his son's side, his large hand holding Noah's small one. He stared at the heart monitor, watching every single breath. His face was a mask of stone, but faint tear tracks marked his cheeks. The most feared man on the East Coast had cried. The doctor explained that Noah had a severe allergic reaction to hazelnuts. Without the immediate injection of epinephrine, the boy would not have survived. "That woman saved him," the doctor explained. "If she had not been there with that medicine, it would have been too late." Nathan only nodded, but a hurricane of guilt raged inside him. He had thrown Evelyn out. He had refused to listen to her warnings. And yet, she had saved his son's life when he deserved no such kindness. At around 3 in the morning, Noah's eyes fluttered open. He was groggy from the medication, but he managed a faint smile when he saw his father. "Dad," he said, his voice hoarse. Nathan leaned over and kissed his forehead, fresh tears escaping his eyes. "I am here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am here now. You are safe." Noah closed his eyes, then opened them again to say the words that would haunt Nathan forever. "Dad," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I am afraid of Camille." Just 4 simple words, but they cut Nathan deeper than any knife. He suddenly remembered everything. Noah asking if Camille liked him. Evelyn's warning he had brushed aside, the fear in his son's eyes whenever Camille was around. He had ignored it all, too desperate for a perfect family to see the ugly truth. "I know," Nathan said, pulling his son close and weeping silently. "I know. I am so sorry. I should have listened." They held one another, a father and son finally sharing a truth that had been buried for too long. An hour later, after Noah was asleep, a guard knocked on the door. "Sir, the woman, Evelyn Harper, is here. She is asking about the boy." Nathan got to his feet. "Let her in." Evelyn looked worn and worried, still in the server's uniform she had used to get inside the event. When she saw Noah breathing peacefully in his bed, a ragged sigh escaped her, and tears finally fell. He was safe. She whispered the words like a prayer. Across the room, Nathan was a portrait of conflict. He could not find the words. This woman had saved his child's life, yet he had treated her with unimaginable cruelty. "How did you know about the medicine?" he finally asked, his voice low and broken. Evelyn's gaze met his, steady and clear. "Because I knew she would make her move tonight." "You knew." "I tried to tell you," she said. Her voice held no blame, only a deep weariness from fighting a battle no one would believe. "You would not listen." Nathan stood in silence for a long moment. He sank into a chair near the window. "Tell me all of it." So Evelyn did. She told him about Camille's words in the bathroom, the planted jewelry, and hiring a private investigator, even when it cost her the chance to fight for Ruby. She explained what the investigator found. "Camille works for Antonio Vega," she said. "He sent her to break you from the inside. Killing Noah was just the start. With your son gone, you would have shattered, and Vega would have moved in." Nathan listened without moving, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she was done, the silence stretched on. He pulled out his phone and dialed Patrick. "Camille's phone," he ordered. "I want everything on it." 15 minutes later, Patrick called back. The report nearly buckled Nathan's knees. Camille's phone held a complete record of her betrayal. There were hundreds of messages with Antonio Vega, call recordings detailing the plot against Noah, and maps of the Hawthorne estate. It listed guard schedules and every weakness in their security. Camille was not just a spy. She was a killer that Nathan had welcomed into his home, into his son's life, and into his own heart. He collapsed into the chair and buried his face in his hands. The most feared man in New York had never felt so defeated. "I almost lost my own son," he whispered, his voice cracking. Evelyn moved to the chair beside him and put a hand on his shoulder. "You are not an evil man," she said softly. "You were just desperate to have a complete family again. I know that feeling. I have been there." Nathan looked at her. "You gave up everything to save my son. Your job, your money, your only chance to get your daughter back. Why?" Evelyn gave him a sad smile. "Because I have a daughter I could not protect," she said, her voice shaking. "I could not stand by and watch another child get hurt. Noah is innocent. He deserved to have someone in his corner." Nathan looked at her, and for the first time, he truly saw the person in front of him. She was not a nanny or a thief. She was brave and strong, with more kindness than anyone he had ever known. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "I owe you my son's life." Evelyn shook her head. "You owe me nothing." She looked at Noah, sleeping soundly. "Seeing him safe is all that matters." Nathan rose to his feet, his gray eyes now as cold and hard as granite. The grief was over. The regret was done. It was time to act. "Take Camille to the warehouse," he told Patrick over the phone. "I will deal with her myself." Nathan's voice was so cold that Patrick, a man who had seen him through countless wars, felt a chill go down his spine. The old warehouse on the edge of New Jersey was the place the Hawthorne family handled its problems. It was a place people entered, but never left. That night, Camille Sinclair was tied to a metal chair in the middle of that vast, empty space. Her perfect blonde hair was a tangled mess. Her beautiful party dress was torn and dirty. The blue eyes that had charmed Nathan now scanned the darkness for an escape that did not exist. When Nathan walked in, her composure shattered. She sobbed that she loved him, that she was forced to do it, that she never had another choice. Nathan stood before her, his face an unreadable mask. For a long moment, he just looked at the woman he had trusted with his heart, the woman he thought would be a mother to his son. "You love me?" he finally said, his voice a low, lethal whisper. "You love me, and you tried to murder my son." Camille cried that Antonio had threatened her family, that she was terrified and had only followed his orders. Nathan knelt until they were eye to eye. "You had a choice," he told her slowly. "You could have told me the truth. I would have protected you and your family." She whispered that he never would have believed her. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But you never gave me the chance." He stood and turned his back on her. "The police will get you, but first you will tell me everything you know about Vega. Every location, every number, every weakness. Everything." Camille hesitated. "If I talk, Antonio will kill me." Nathan looked over his shoulder, his eyes empty of all mercy. "If you do not talk, I will kill you," he said, "and I promise, what I do will be much slower than anything Vega can imagine." The absolute cruelty in his voice proved it was not a threat. She knew the stories about him, the boss who killed 17 men in one night to avenge his wife, and she had just tried to kill his only child. So she talked. She gave him Vega's primary base in the Bronx. She described the number of guards, their patrol routes, and every blind spot in their security. She revealed the plan to attack the Hawthorne family after Noah's death, when Nathan's grief would make him vulnerable. She confessed to everything, hoping for mercy that was already gone. 2 nights later, Nathan led the attack himself. He did not bring 50 men. He brought over 100, all armed for a single purpose: to destroy the family that had targeted his son. The assault was fast and overwhelming. Vega's men never had a chance. Gunfire shattered the silence of the night. Nathan's men moved like a tidal wave, crushing all in their path. Within an hour, Vega's compound had fallen. They found Antonio Vega in a fortified basement, trying to escape. Nathan stood before his oldest rival, the man who ordered his wife Isabel's death 5 years ago, the man who had just tried to murder his son. "You tried to kill my boy," Nathan said calmly. Antonio, on his knees with a gun to his head, managed a broken smile. "The boy is your only weakness." Nathan nodded slowly. "Yes, he was." He raised his weapon. "And you touched that weakness." A single shot ended Antonio Vega's life. Nathan stood over the body of the man who had taken Isabel and nearly taken Noah. There was no victory, no satisfaction. There was only a hollow quiet. But Noah was safe, and that was enough. Camille was delivered to the authorities with a mountain of evidence detailing attempted murder and conspiracy. The trial lasted for 3 months and captured the nation's attention. The text messages, the recorded calls, and Noah's medical records destroyed any possible defense. Her lawyers argued she had been forced, but the jury did not believe her. Camille Sinclair received a sentence of 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. As they led her from the courtroom, she looked back at Nathan one last time. He sat in the front row with Noah beside him and never once met her gaze. To him, she was already a ghost. The Sinclair family, while not involved, paid a heavy price. Nathan dismantled their business empire, erased their social standing, and cut them loose to fade into obscurity. After the trial, Nathan Hawthorne returned home with a new purpose. He had also brought Ruby to live at the mansion. He had almost lost his son to his own blindness, a mistake he would never make again. The next day, he called a meeting with Patrick and his senior men. He announced he was stepping back from the daily running of the business. The family still had a leader, he explained, but his son needed a father more. Patrick would manage day-to-day affairs. Nathan would only step in when absolutely necessary. It was an unprecedented move in the history of the Hawthorne family. In the weeks that followed, Nathan dedicated his time to Noah. He drove his son to school each morning. He picked him up in the afternoon, asking about his classes and his friends. Every evening, he sat by Noah's bed and read stories until he fell asleep, a ritual he had abandoned after Isabel died. He was learning how to truly listen, not just with his ears, but with his entire being. "I am sorry I did not listen to you," Nathan told Noah one night, after they had finished a story. "I am so sorry. I promise I will always listen from now on. Whatever you need to tell me, I will hear you." Noah looked at his father, and the premature hardness in the boy's eyes began to soften. "I love you, Dad," he whispered. "I love you too," Nathan answered, holding him tightly. "More than anything." But Nathan understood that love was not enough. Camille had left deep, invisible scars on his son. He found the best child therapist in New York, a kind woman named Dr. Rachel Chen. Noah met with her 2 times a week. He was quiet at first, only communicating through his drawings. Slowly, he started to talk. He spoke of Camille's cruel words, of feeling like an intruder in his own house, and of being afraid his father would love someone else more. Every word was a fresh wound in Nathan's heart. He waited outside for every appointment, and when Dr. Chen told him what his son had been through, he had to fight the urge to break down. He had failed his son. He had allowed him to suffer in silence for so long. He vowed never to fail him again. Eleanor saw the change in her son with a mix of relief and sorrow. She was happy that Nathan finally understood what was important, but pained by the terrible price of that lesson. One night, as Nathan sat in his study after putting Noah to sleep, Eleanor joined him. "You have learned the hardest lesson there is, my son," she said softly. Nathan stared into the darkness. "I almost lost him, Mom. My own blindness nearly killed my son." "But you did not lose him," Eleanor replied. "And now you will never make that mistake again. That is what matters." Nathan was quiet for a long time. He thought of Evelyn, the woman who had lost everything to protect Noah. "I do not know how to fix what I did to her," he finally admitted. "She lost her job, and her only chance to get her daughter back because of me." A slow smile spread across Eleanor's face. "Then help her get back everything she lost," she said. "She gave you back your son. You can give her back her daughter." Nathan looked at his mother, and for the first time in weeks, he felt hope. He could not erase the past, but he could build a new future for all of them. 3 weeks after Camille was sentenced, Nathan found Evelyn on a rainy afternoon. He went alone, with no driver and no bodyguards. He wore a simple black coat and held the address to a run-down apartment in Brooklyn. The neighborhood was gray and forgotten, with crumbling buildings and the smell of wet garbage in the air. Nathan stopped in front of door number 7 and paused. He had faced down countless enemies without a trace of fear. But standing before the woman he had wronged so badly, he felt like a sinner begging for absolution. The door swung open to reveal Evelyn. Her brown hair was pulled back, and her face was sharper than he remembered from the hospital. But her eyes still held their warmth. She saw him and froze, completely caught off guard. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Nathan." He corrected her gently. "Just Nathan." Evelyn remained silent. She did not welcome him inside, but she did not shut the door either. She knew better than to expect anything good from powerful men. "I came to say I am sorry," Nathan began, his voice low and honest. He had no speech planned, just the plain truth. "I refused to listen when you tried to warn me. I treated you like a criminal. I stood by while you lost everything for trying to keep my son safe. And you saved Noah anyway, when I deserved nothing. There is no excuse for my actions. I can only apologize and try to make things right." For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. Then, without any anger, she spoke. "I did not do it for you. I did it for Noah." "I know," Nathan agreed. "Nathan. And that only makes my debt to you greater." He held her gaze. "I know about your daughter, Ruby." Evelyn went rigid, her eyes wide with shock. I had someone look into your situation, Nathan admitted. I know you lost custody because of your ex-husband. I know his family is keeping your daughter from you. I want to help you get her back. Why? Evelyn's voice shook, though she fought to keep it steady. Why would you do that for me? Nathan chose his words with care. Because you showed me something important. You showed me that a person can lose everything and still choose to save someone else's child. You deserve to have your own daughter back. He had the power to make that happen. Tears finally escaped and rolled down her face. She had cried so much already and thought she had no tears left. But this felt different. This was the sting of hope, something she believed was gone forever. I have nothing to offer you, she whispered. I do not want anything from you, Nathan said. This is not a transaction. It is what is right. And Nathan was a man of his word. He hired the best family lawyers in New York, a team famous for never losing. They took on Evelyn's case, and their findings shocked even Nathan. Her ex-husband, Brandon Mitchell, had paid a doctor to fake medical reports, declaring Evelyn an unfit mother. After Brandon died, his family bribed a judge to gain custody. The whole case was a lie, built on money and influence. With this new proof and a relentless legal team, the court had no choice but to act. The Mitchell family fought back with their own lawyers, but they were not prepared to face Nathan Hawthorne. He had the wealth and the will to see this through to the end. The fight lasted 6 weeks. The court cleared Evelyn Harper of every false claim. She was awarded full and immediate custody of her daughter. The Mitchell family faced charges of fraud and bribery, their power broken. The day Evelyn was reunited with Ruby was a day Nathan would never forget. He and Noah watched from a distance as a mother ran to her child after 2 years of forced separation. Ruby, a little girl of 4 with her mother's brown hair and wide, innocent eyes, stood nervously by a social worker outside the building. Then she spotted Evelyn. "Mommy!" Ruby shouted and ran with all her might. Evelyn fell to her knees, her arms open wide. When Ruby collided with her, she held the child as if she might vanish. "My baby," Evelyn sobbed, her face wet with tears. "I missed you so much. I am so sorry I was gone." "I missed you," Ruby cried into her shoulder. "I waited for you. I am here now," Evelyn promised through her own tears, "and I am never ever leaving you again." Nathan watched them, a profound warmth spreading through his chest. Beside him, Noah squeezed his hand, his own eyes shining. "Dad," he whispered, "Evelyn is happy now." "Yes, son," Nathan said quietly, holding his hand tighter. "She deserves to be." They stood there for a long time, a father and son watching a mother and daughter become whole again. Nathan realized this was the most important thing he had ever done with his power. Not for business, not for control, but to give a mother her child back. In the days that followed, Nathan offered to help Evelyn find a new home. He suggested a luxury apartment in Manhattan, but she refused. She said she did not need anything fancy, just a safe place for her and Ruby. Nathan understood. They found a clean, bright 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of Queens. It had windows that looked out over a small park where Ruby could play. Evelyn insisted on accepting it as a loan, even when Nathan called it a gift. She promised to pay him back one day. Nathan simply smiled, knowing he would never collect. Soon, Nathan and Evelyn started to see each other regularly. It was not for business. It was because Noah missed his Evelyn. Every weekend, Nathan would bring Noah to their apartment, or Evelyn, and Ruby would visit his home. The 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl, became fast friends. Noah, who was often quiet, became more open and playful around Ruby. He read to her and taught her to draw, acting like a protective older brother. Ruby adored him, following him everywhere and calling him Brother Noah. As the children played, Evelyn and Nathan talked. Their conversations started to flow easily. They did not speak of romance or the future. They talked about life. They shared the things they had survived and the values they held dear. Nathan spoke of his late wife, Isabel, of his love for her, and the pain of her loss. Evelyn spoke of Brandon, of the nightmare he had put her through, and the loneliness that followed. By sharing their scars, they began to heal. One night, after the kids were asleep on the sofa, Evelyn finally asked Nathan a question that had been on her mind. "Are you not afraid of me?" she asked quietly. "I know about your business. I know what you are capable of." Nathan looked at her, his gray eyes no longer cold and hard. "You are the only one who ever told me the truth, even when it cost you everything," he said. "You were not afraid of me when the whole world was. You wanted nothing from me when I offered you everything. You just saw my son as a child who needed help." He paused. "No, Evelyn. I am not afraid of you. I respect you." Then he added, his voice softer, "And if I am being honest, I am starting to care for you. But I will not rush you. You have been through enough. I will wait, if you will let me." Evelyn looked into his eyes, searching for the lies she had seen in Brandon. She found none. She saw only honesty and a quiet patience. "I do not know if I am ready," she admitted. "But I want to keep seeing you. I want to see what this could be." A real smile touched Nathan's eyes for the first time since Isabel's death. "That is enough," he said. "It is more than enough." What grew between them was slow and careful, like the first days of spring after a long winter. They were two broken people learning to be whole again, side by side. 1 year later, Nathan and Evelyn stood before a two-story building in a quiet suburb of New York. It was the center's opening day. It was not a grand place, just a few warm rooms with kind staff and a corner filled with books and toys. It was a child protection center, a safe place for children who had been hurt or ignored, for kids whose voices had been silenced. The idea came from Evelyn, who knew what it was like to scream and have no one listen. The money came from Nathan, who was finally using his power to protect the truly vulnerable. A new beginning. Noah chose the name for the center himself. He called it a safe place. During the opening, Evelyn stood at the microphone. Her voice was emotional but strong. She looked right at Noah in the front row. "This place is here because one child decided to speak," she said, "and because someone else chose to listen. We cannot erase what happened, but we can create a place where children know they will be heard, where they know they deserve to be safe." Nathan stood just behind her, away from the spotlight. He watched the woman he loved and felt a sense of peace he had not known since Isabel died. Noah held Ruby's hand. Both children were beaming as the room filled with applause. Later that night, Nathan and Evelyn sat on the porch. The children's laughter floated from the garden as the sun set. Nathan spoke, his voice unusually low. "Evelyn, I am not a simple man. I have a dark past and a complicated future. I can never promise you a normal life." She turned to him, her eyes soft and understanding. "I know who you are, Nathan," she replied. "I know the things you have done, and I am still here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. The ring inside was not large or flashy. It was a simple band with a single clear stone. He knew what she valued was honesty, not wealth. "Will you let me try to be a man who deserves you?" he asked, his voice shaking just a little. "Will you let me love you and Ruby as my own family?" Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." He placed the ring on her finger, and they held each other in the fading light. Two broken people finding their way back to whole. A voice called from the garden. It was Noah. "Dad, Ruby wants to know if Aunt Evelyn is going to be my new mom." Nathan looked at Evelyn, his eyes full of light. "My son needs an answer." Evelyn gave the brightest laugh he had ever heard. "You can tell him it is true." Nathan stood and pulled her to her feet. They walked into the garden together. Noah ran straight to Evelyn. Ruby ran straight to Nathan. And right there, 4 people from broken pasts became a complete family. The story may end, but its lesson remains. Nathan learned that love cannot be rushed, that healing comes quietly, and that safety is built slowly, day by day. It is built by listening. It is built by choosing to be brave. It is built by never ignoring a small voice telling a hard truth. This story shows us that danger does not always scream. Sometimes it smiles and asks for your trust. Love without listening is not real love. Children often see danger before adults will. And one brave voice, no matter how small or scared, can change everything. Evelyn had no influence. She had no money or protection. All she had was her own conscience. And it was more than enough. If this story meant something to you, think about your own life. Have you ever ignored that quiet inner voice? Or have you ever spoken up, even when you were afraid? We want to hear from you. Please share your own experiences in the comments. Your voice is important to us. We believe every story deserves to be heard. If you feel that stories like this one can help protect people and open hearts, please like this video, share it with those you care about, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Every like, share, and subscription allows us to keep creating this content for you. We are so grateful you stayed with us for this journey. We wish you good health, a life of happiness, and peaceful days with the people you love. Always remember, the greatest gift you can give someone is to truly listen. Goodbye, and we will see you again in our next video. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful lessons and lasting value. Thank you for being part of our community.